So one of the things that our group came up with, and one of the general consensus of our conversation, was the fact that a lot of our views haven't changed when it comes to what we've talked about throughout the semester when it comes to the two reflections. But instead, we've gotten just new information to help us kind of enforce what we're talking about. Like for example, when hold on, I'm reading my notes. The purpose of music education in schools, um, like through our first discussion about like where it should be, where it should look like in music schools, um, everything is sort of tied together, I think is what we said. So like from the very beginning, we kind of had a general understanding of what music ed could be. But then as we learned more and more about like music ed and what actually entails it, we discovered that there's a lot deeper things to talk about than we had initially thought about. So like for example, yeah, like uh, what that like tying the first reflection into the second reflection, we kind of discussed how pop music, which was what we talked about in the second response, ties into the first response, like the first question, which was that what do you think education should look like in schools? And from that, we kind of established that we need to include more diverse music in our elementary schools, and especially elementary schools and middle schools and high schools. And how that discussion kind of grew from just talking about that to talking about how we need to educate teachers in order to teach it well. Because right now, if we were to try to introduce hip hop into high school, most likely it would be taught by a white person. And while they might do the best job that they can with the information that they know, a white person can't necessarily give as much of the culture behind hip hop as well as someone who is actually part of that culture. Um, that was a big thing that we talked about, and then also kind of tying together like what good teaching looks like, is sort of like, again, ties into that idea that we as a society just need to be more accepting of new things instead of just sticking to the old white men music. Like we talked about how one of the biggest things that we figured out in our high school years, right? High school, middle school, somewhere around there, was that a lot of the music we played was just like written by white people, and was like very Western styled music. And I think what we came up with is that it's partly because, a lot of teachers don't have the capability or the knowledge to teach things like hip hop or things like Chinese music or African music. A lot of people try to include that sort of thing in their teaching, but what we discovered is that a lot of the times it could be seen as sort of a derivative of what the initial intent was. Like for example, we talked about the whip and nay again, and how that was sort of that was just, it was kind of painful to watch the first time because not only because it was like tied to our childhood, but also because it was so whitewashed, and it was just so uncomfortable to see like these middle school kids doing something where it was obvious that they were enjoying it, like that little kid in the front, but they didn't fully grasp what they were doing, I think. And I don't think the teacher did either, because it seemed to be done with good intent. But what we discussed was that just like we need to be better about teaching educators what is right and what is wrong. And so overall, it was really just we had a good discussion about what it really means to be a music educator, and how we can take things that we've learned throughout the class, like reading all those different books and learning all those new songs. All that stuff really helped to allow us to gain knowledge. Was really so. Yeah, it was. It's been a really good journey through this class, and I think we all are really happy to say that we took this class.